On today's Worship Leader Wednesday, we're going to talk about the relationship between the sound engineer and the band or the worship leader. So this is another video that is born from a question that you guys have been asking in the comments. We love your questions, your comments, the discussion that happens below. We read these things, we try to engage as much as we can. But here's the question that was posed about sound engineers.
And this comes from Tyler M. And he says this: I run the sound booth in our small church, and I want to understand proper dynamics between a worship team and sound team in a bigger church. I'm curious what your relationship is like with the people in the booth, and what would be your ideal relationship with them. For example, do you like more hands-on, where the sound guy helps craft the overall sound, or do you like a passive person in the booth that just mixes without giving input to the worship team? Great question, Tyler. I'm going to read into this question a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume maybe, Tyler, you've probably run into some either issues, or maybe you're currently not happy with the way it is. Maybe you don't feel like you're being heard, or maybe you want to be more involved. I don't know. I'm assuming those things, but I will tell you this. I love the fact that you're watching these videos
As a sound,
as a sound engineer, because I'll tell you this right now: the most important person on your worship team is your sound person.
Well, he can sure make it, or he or she can sure make it.
Because I'll tell you this right now: the bands and the vocalists can practice all day, and they can sound like the album, and they can nail every riff and get it perfect. But a bad mix can destroy everything.
Yes, it can.
And so, whereas on the other side, if you have a mediocre band with a great mix, it's going to sound money. So Tyler, you are the man. And all worship leaders watching this, you should recognize today that the most important person on your worship team is actually not on stage. It's your front of house guy.
Do this too. Stop what you're doing. Send him an email, give him a phone call, and say, I'm taking you out to lunch.
That's right.
Wherever you want to go.
That's right. The smart leader, the smart leader will become best friends with the sound guy. So to answer your question, Tyler, and this kind of is the same, I think, in most scenarios for me. To me, I think the relationship is critical.
Yeah.
Like, how can I show up every Sunday and expect a sound person to deliver, the idea that I have in my head, right? Because I'm the worship arts pastor, so I have an idea of what I want it to feel and sound like. And so the sound guy's job is to allow that vision to come to fruition with his own taste and flair.
Yeah.
And so if you and I don't have a relationship, if you don't know me, if you don't know what I want, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
I think worship leaders are guilty, and I'm guilty of this. I have these expectations in my head, but I'm not saying them.
Yeah.
So if they don't happen, I get frustrated.
Yeah.
And so, like, if the sound guy, like, for me, I'm known as I like lots of effects, right? I like verb, I like delay, I like a pretty wet mix, especially live. And so I've had sound guys that run it really dry, and my initial response is to get frustrated, but in reality is I haven't told them that I want a wet mix. And so I'll tell the sound guy, I'm like, hey, I love it wet, more verb, more delay, be very specific. So you guys got to have the kind of relationship where you know what he wants. The sound guy has to know what the worship leader wants. And disclaimer, no offense, but not what the lead singers want, not what the drummer wants, not what the bass player wants, what the worship leader wants. Because the worship leader is the one sculpting the sound. Because here's what I know about musicians. Drummers want more drums, bass player wants more bass, vocalists want more vocals, keyboardist wants more keyboard. At the end of the day, you just turn everything up, right? And it's the same, just louder. So the sound guy and the worship leader have to be really in sync. You don't have to be best friends, but you have to have a relationship where you know each other and you know how each other works, because you'll get better results. And so that's the first thing. As far as how much input I want from the sound guy, what the input that I want from the sound guy is usually more of a technical input. I don't necessarily want creative input from the sound person on the fly. Like Sunday morning in between songs is not where I want to hear, hey, we should put a ring modulator on your vocals. Like, that's a conversation,
Sounds like a terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea. That's a conversation you have offline somewhere else. But I want
lunch that you're paying for.
Exactly. The lunch that I'm paying for is where I want you to tell me this. What I want from you is, hey, the snare drum sounds like a box, and I've tried everything. Can we mess around with that? Or, hey, the vocalists are really off, I'm trying my best. I don't know what to do. What should I do? In which case I'll probably say just turn them all down until we figure out a better situation. And so yeah, I want technical input from you. I want, we had a sound guy Troy, who's an amazing sound guy, but he would often tell me there'd be two guitar players, and he would often say, "Hey Fuller, can one of you guys play like a more chunky vibe and one of you play more of like a high, brighter vibe? That way I can get a better balance." And I'll do that.
Yeah, that's good technical input.
Yeah. Now, or he might say, "Hey, it'd be really sweet if someone played acoustic on this track."
Yeah, or he would say, "Guys, turn your reverb down."
Yeah. He would always
say that.
Less gain, less reverb. So I think your feedback is critical. Here's what I would avoid. Worship leaders should not talk to the sound guy in the microphone.
Yeah.
Unless it's positive and encouraging. Often you hear worship leaders, everyone's in the room and the worship leader goes up to the mic, "Hey, it sounds like crap in my ears."
Yeah, that's not
Dude,
good.
if I was a sound guy, I'd be jacking you up right now. And so I think it's really important that relationship is critical between the sound guy and the worship leader. You got to love each other, and you got to want the same thing. What you got to want is excellence.
Yeah.
And then between the worship leader's musical expertise, hopefully, and the sound guy's technical expertise, hopefully, those two things will come together and make really great sound.
One thing a lot of sound people and worship leaders struggle with is monitor or in-ear mixes.
Yeah.
Because when I used to be in a church where we had wedge monitors, it was a constant battle. Now, in our church, what we do is we have in-ear mixes, and we have an app on our phone. We use Midas or Behringer boards. It's the same company. So like all of our campuses have either a Behringer X32 or a Midas M32. And you guys run the Midas Pro something.
Pro X, yeah.
Yeah. And so we can have our own mix, and everyone has control of their own mix, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So if you can do that in your church, and you can do that with soundboards that aren't that expensive, the Behringer X32 is a great entry level digital board that will allow you to do that. That will take the pressure off of the sound person to to handle monitor mixes. But if you're running wedge monitors, you're just gonna have to come up with like a solution that works. Or even if your sound person's controlling in-ear mixes, you just have to find a solution that works. One thing that I hate during rehearsals as a worship leader is when the band and the production just constantly are struggling with monitor mixes. Like spending 30 minutes getting just the perfect amount of reverb in your ears or whatever. Like
forget it.
Get something that works and go with it.
Yeah.
So that's where a worship leader probably needs to take control a little bit and say, okay, we're going to spend 5 more minutes on the monitor mix. Yeah. And after that, we're done. Yeah.
Here's another little just rant, if you will, but I want to encourage all of you sound people out there and technical productions people, don't be jerks. Because it's so easy, because sometimes it's easy to be a jerk to a musician sometimes. But the best sound people that I know are the just humble and gracious and geniuses. And so humility and gentleness go a long way, and patience, of course. And then on the flip side of that, worship leaders, don't be jerks.
Yes.
Like the sound guy you're not his boss. It's like you don't own him. Like you guys have to work together to get a great sound. And at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about the whole thing. Yeah. One of the things that I have is kind of like an unwritten rule and a policy on our team. I don't let any of our worship team talk to the sound guy. Our vocalists don't have the liberty to go, "Hey, can I get some more of this, or can I get some more of that?" Like, they come to me and they tell me what they need, and then I will talk to the sound person. Because what happens is the sound person has 15 people asking for things at the same time. And it's chaos, and it's
3 people.
Even 3 people. So you funnel everything through this relation. The sound guy and the worship leader, they solve all of the problems together. And so if there's production people that need things from the worship leaders, they go through that person. If there's the drummer needs something, he talks to me. And obviously depending on the sort of relationship that everyone has, respect and patience and grace goes a long way. Because the truth is this, as a musician, if it doesn't sound good to you, it's really hard to perform.
Yes,
it's hard as a vocalist, and sound guys, please understand this. As a vocalist, if it sounds terrible in my ears or I can't hear anything, I am not going to be a great worship leader. Yeah. And so you have to understand that what you do is enabling God to use us, to use our gifts. And the same with the worship leader. If the sound guy doesn't have what he needs, if the source is terrible, if the guitar amp's too loud, if the keyboard sound is terrible, there's only so many things he can do to fix it. And so he's not a miracle worker. So we've got to work together and come up with solutions to eventually what they call sculpting, and that's what it is. You're taking a huge pile of clay and you're sculpting the sound together. And so the relationship is critical. I will say this, your question, you were talking about you're at a small church and you want to know what the dynamics are like at a big church. I would say they should be the exact same. It should be one of respect. It should be one of kind of relational. It should be one where the sound guy understands the worship leader's vision for what the sound is, and the worship leader should understand the strengths of the sound guy, and together you work together and kind of create this result. Whether you're a church of 50 people or 5,000 people, it's going to be the same. The biggest difference is as your team grows, learning to manage those relationships and all of the needs of the extra teams and stuff.
Another tip on this topic, and this could be for the worship leader, for church leadership, is invest in education for your production volunteers, for your production people. If you have a sound person who has an ear for what great music sounds like, but maybe doesn't know all the ins and outs of the equipment that you have, or like how EQ and compression, like you got to understand gain stage, EQ, and compression if you're going to run
and
sound.
Reverbs,
and so like if you have somebody who wants to run sound, has an ear for music and knows what sounds good, but doesn't quite know how to tweak an EQ to get what they want out of it, there's a lot of resources out there online or like classes that you can take. Your church would benefit greatly if you just invest in your volunteers and get them some training resources if they're willing to learn.
Another thing too is, as a worship leader, try to find a weekend where you don't have to be on stage, so that you can be back with your sound guy and listen to what he's doing. Because when you're on stage, it's not the same. And so try to figure out a time where you, with the sound guy, or go to concerts, and talk about them. Like, hey, what did you like about it? I loved how the bass was like, or the kick drum was really punchy, or, whatever. Go to hear live music together so that you can get on the same page as to what you're looking for, trying to accomplish.
I'm a sound guy, and my worship leader won't take me to lunch.
What I tell my sound guy is to start everybody at 0, and the better you play, the louder you get. So if you're low in the mix, it's probably because you're not playing that well.